There's a number of strategies or sort of ways of building trust. The research and most sort of appropriate way is based on attachment theory. And attachment theory is something that all psychologists pretty much agree on. If there's a baby in one room and the baby's crying, and a caregiver in the other room is completely zen, completely relaxed, what does the child do 9 times out of 10? Take a guess.
Keeps crying.
So the solution is the adult comes into the room with the kid, mirrors their state, there's trust built, and then the parent can get zen. Then the parent sort of moves back into a more relaxed place. And 9 times out of 10, the kid will follow the adult. And that seems like a very simple story, but it is the essence of psychotherapy. It's the essence of any mentor that you've ever trusted. It's the essence of, I think, leadership between a leader and a team is matching and then inviting to another functional level.
You are listening to Personalization Outbreak, a podcast about the collapse of traditional corporate standards in today's more personalized world. I'm Glenn Llopis. I'm a leadership strategist, author, contributor to Forbes, and founder of the Leadership in the Age of Personalization movement. On this show, I'm interviewing executives across multiple sectors to find out how the balance between standardization and personalization can exist.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Personalization Outbreak Podcast. I'm Glenn Llopis. The conscious mind is everything we are aware of, like our thoughts and our feelings. And think about that today. We're so much more concerned about how we're feeling these days, while the unconscious mind is truly hidden and it holds deeper thoughts and memories we don't usually think about. Both parts of our mind are important, but understanding them and how they interconnect, takes some time to understand this. And to help us better understand the interconnection between the conscious and unconscious mind is our special guest today, Todd Hollow. He's the co-CEO at Pathwise Leadership. Now, I've had the opportunity to get to know Todd. He's quite a guy. You're going to like his style. He's chill. And he takes this stuff really seriously. I mean, he has 30 years of organizational and academic leadership experience with expertise in developing highly effective leaders and teams through the practice of psychoanalytics, neuroscience, and consciousness research. So before we get started, please click the like button below, share it with your colleagues, and subscribe to our YouTube channel and social media at Glenn Llopis. Todd, great to have you. Thanks for taking the time. I know we've put a lot into this. Let's have fun together.
Yeah, it sounds wonderful. And it's great to be here.
Well, thank you. So 13 years at this, Todd. Why does this matter to you?
Why it matters is really already at the crux of the question for me. Because there's why it matters because I want to be here to promote my business. There's promote these ideas. But why am I really here is probably the reason why, 40 years ago, I began to work in psychiatric hospitals and began to later teach at universities, which is there's a connection between people where there's a level of conversation and a quality of understanding that can be developed where I feel more human and the people I'm around feel more human. And as we start this conversation, what came to me first is like, why are your viewers here today? Like, what are they here for? And in a sense, they may have a history of trusting you, Glenn, and have heard maybe that this topic is interesting. And all of that is their conscious reason. But I'm very, very interested in why else are they here? Why unconsciously? So if I was to propose a thought experiment, it would be like, if you're listening to this right now, to ask yourself, why really am I watching and listening to this right now? And what comes up? And in that quiet, which is a little bit unbearable, we begin to speak to ourselves. And so for me, when you share like why is it important to me, it's to be able to dive deeply into a deep conversation with others and not just stay on the surface.
Todd, this is why you're here. At least this is why I was interested, because when this was all brought up about, and again, I think this is a classical standardization to personalization shift here. It was all about Pathwise Leadership and the work that you do. And then as I started to get to know you, I realized, yes, it is about Pathwise, but it's actually more. Because what you're really working on is taking us and helping us understand that standardized thinking that stays at surface level is very limiting. And it's not until we go into the deeper, into the depths of why we do things, do we start to really unveil what matters to people. And, that's what has really gotten my attention and why I'm so glad you're here, because my question, Todd, is how do we get people to go from the surface and accept that it's okay to go deep without this feeling of anxiety that going deep means I have to be accountable to something, when really what it is, at least through my experience, is it's an unleashing of things we've always been thinking about, but didn't have the courage to say.
Yeah, there's a number of strategies or sort of ways of building trust. The research and most sort of appropriate way is based on attachment theory. And attachment theory is something that all psychologists pretty much agree on, and that is the relationship between the primary caregiver and the child sort of sets the model for how the kid works in the world. And we're all geared in a way to be able to relate to others, to feel for others. And kind of corresponding with attachment theory is this research that's been duplicated everywhere, which I've been sharing the story from now for like 20 years. And I'll simplify it. If there's a baby in one room, and this is a long way of getting to your answer, Glenn, but I believe that the longer story has more impact.
No, please.
If there's a baby in one room and the baby's crying, and a caregiver in the other room is completely zen, completely relaxed, and everyone gets this question wrong, so I'll preface it, but the zen caregiver, mom or dad, comes in and only stays relaxed and kind of works with the child and changes its diaper, does whatever. What does the child do 9 times out of 10? Take a guess.
Keeps crying.
Yeah, you knew. So you reverse engineered this. So yeah, 9 times out of 10, the kid looks at the grown-up and sees that the grown-up doesn't get what they're feeling. And so it keeps crying. It may even cry harder. It's like, can you get me? So exactly. So you nailed it. The second scenario, again, trick question. So you can reverse engineer it again if you want. But the kid's in the room, the kid's like crying, and mom or dad comes in. And now mom or dad, because of mirror neurons that we have, matches the kind of tension that the kid's feeling. And the kid looks up, and they've got it down to like 9 inches, and they've measured this. And the kid totally knows that mom or dad gets them, and mom or dad stays kind of stressed and fixes their diaper or whatever. What does the kid do 9 times out of 10?
I don't know.
Oh, thank you for your generosity. So the 9 times out of 10, the kid goes and goes, okay, you get me. But because the parent keeps crying or keeps being stressed out, the kid stays stressed out too. It starts amplifying each other. So the solution is the adult comes into the room with the kid, mirrors their state, there's trust built, and then the parent can get zen. Then the parent sort of moves back into a more relaxed place. And 9 times out of 10, the kid will follow the adult. So that brain to brain relationship is the same between an adult and a kid, a manager and an employee, 2 colleagues, 2 spouse, that we all need to be able to meet and match the person that we're with, even if it's being shallow with them for a moment, so that there's a relationship. And then one of those two people can begin to become more deep, and it invites the other person to be deep with them. And that seems like a very simple story, but it is the essence of psychotherapy. It's the essence of any mentor that you've ever trusted. It's the essence of, I think, leadership between a leader and a team is matching and then inviting to another functional level.
So what's the lesson here, Todd, for a leader?
The lesson is don't always be Zen and don't freak out when your team's freaking out, but match them, be able to identify where they're at, meet them, and then to begin to be present to yourself, to go, right?
Yeah, well, I think you just said it. Identify with them.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Right? Identify with them. And I, but for people who have been leading and working in a certain way for so long, I mean, aren't we asking a lot from people to do that? And I only see this in my work. I mean, it's hard for people that to think that now I have to be partially responsible for what other people are thinking and feeling. How do you help someone get there?
Yeah, it's all our stuff again is attached to neuropsych and developmental stages, and if you have had kids or you see kids go through these stages, as infants, we need to be cared for. As toddlers, we're self-centered and we want our way. As young teenagers, on a good day, we care about our friends a lot, not so much our parents. And as young adults, we start having aspirations and are able to abstract reason towards those aspirations. Well, as adults, we move up and down all of those different levels, like daily. And in the first half of our careers, even as leaders, we actually only need to be good at the first 2 or 3. So somebody can be very good at what they do, be very driven, have lots of accomplishments, and then they get promoted. And then they have a team. And if they keep trying to relate to that team through driving them for the beginning of the career, it's okay. But once it becomes complex, once they're in more senior leadership and management, usually about midlife in the career, it all becomes about the people. And if you can't relate to the people and sort of gestalt a team into its working with each other, then you're going to just be whipping people all day and trying to give them money, which is
So why does it take so long in someone's career trajectory to finally realize that it is all about the people?
It's again, it's a brain functional state. So a lot of people think of psychology as nebulous. It's just there's this brain and stuff happens in there, and it's much better to think of it as you're traveling over the United States and an airplane, and you see all these cities connected by roads and lights across the United States, and that our brain is physical like that. And these patterns that we've learned are literally wired in our brain. So that's why it's possible to do new things. There's plasticity, but we are wired to do things exactly like we've always done it. And it isn't until that wiring, which works for a while, meets new and complex situations where it doesn't work, do we begin to develop new physical roadways in our brain. And it has to be developed. It's not a light switch. It's not a book I read and now I do it, but it's a muscle and it's a development. And all of a sudden there's new cities and new connections, and we see the value of that.
So why is it so hard for people to let go of what they're so comfortable doing? Why is that? What is it that's holding them back? Is it, I mean, we talked about trust earlier. Is it about trust in themselves? Is it that they feel like they're going to expose part of themselves? What is it? Because this state that you're talking about, Todd, is very real. It's hard to rewire people to actually reclaim themselves. Because if I were to go back and use what you shared about the first half of their career, by the time they know it's all about people, they've wired themselves to be so hyper standard, to move to being more personalized. It's a challenge for them, but they know that that's what they have to do.
Yeah. And not everyone's going to do it. Actually, it's probably 20-25% at most are going to do that. What's interesting is if you have successfully used a pattern that works up until about sort of the middle of your career, it no longer is as fulfilling because you're already good at it. Its return isn't as strong, and you actually begin to become unconsciously compelled to learn the things that you don't know. And a lot of us resist that because I've done the same things. I get paid for this, and now if I'm an individual contributor who's always been driven, and I'm very successful, I'll find around 35, 40, 45 at the latest that now I don't want to, but I actually start caring about people and I want that team relationship stuff. Or inversely, I could be someone who's been really good at managing people. And around 35 or 40, it's like, I'm good at that. It doesn't bring me meaning anymore. Now I want big goals and I want to be able to take a team towards a big goal. And I'm actually going to care about the goal more. And that transition from bringing in sort of a psychoanalytic or psychodynamic framework, um, which is a little more complicated, but I'll try. So in a sense, the we all have these personalities, and I won't use the labels today, but we all have these personalities, and each of the personalities are driven by a primary emotion. So one of the personalities is very good at details, but gets told that they micromanage. They take on too much stuff, but it's because they want to please everybody. And they usually like the straight A students, most of their lives. And they're driven by guilt. And if I've been working with literally thousands of people, and a certain percentage have this personality. And so they've these great careers that are driven by guilt. It's like if they fail, they take on more, they're always growing. But in the middle, and they begin to identify unconsciously that if I don't feel guilty, I don't know who I am. Right. And so part of them wants to feel less guilty, but part of them doesn't know who they would be. And so it's this great jumping across an abyss to be able to begin to let go of this guilt and work hard for the wish of what it is. Another one, it's I'm afraid all the time. And so I withdraw and I have these great ideas. I'm great at architecting solutions to problems. And if I'm not afraid, who am I? Another one, it's they need to bond people. These are great managers. Everyone loves them because they really care about the team in a heartfelt way. And if somebody leaves the team, they feel abandoned almost. That there's this connection, and if they don't feel that sort of that's the sad need to keep everyone together, they don't know who they are. So we're all kind of unconsciously driven by an emotion, and in the second half life, it's possible to be freer of it.
So how does all, this interconnection between conscious and the unconscious mind, what role does it play in decision-making and behavior? Let's say decision-making.
I'll use a very objective scientific example, which if you have extreme scientists or technical people, they'll wrestle with this, which I think will be good. So when I was in graduate school, in psychology, one of the things that was interesting was reading all these dissertations and all this literature on objective data-driven analysis of things. And so we would read it and the data would go one way and there would be a hypothesis and a conclusion. And then we'd read another one, data, and then we looked at it psychologically and we found that 99.99% of the time, the bias of the researcher was always finding data that validated their bias. It was unconscious, and the whole time they did a hypothesis, they collected data, they ran the data, and then it gave the conclusion. So they have this whole conscious belief that they've been objective, and yet you can predict perfectly almost the outcome that they're going to have because unconsciously they wanted that outcome. And that's why people believe that the environment is fine and they have lots of data that proves it. Very small percentage as time goes on. And there's other people that the data is clear that the environment's going to hell and these are the reasons. And everyone unconsciously is making decisions in their lives based on their unconscious biases that they're unaware of. And part of the goal of the Pathwise or psychoanalysis is to be conscious of them. And then you may be conscious of it and still go that direction. It's not a moral decision. But the goal is to become conscious of things that you're unconscious.
So let's shift gears here. Let's say that we're trying to develop a new organizational culture. And we're now dealing with all kinds of different dynamics, as we know, in today's workplace. Where do you start? With the individual, with the environment, or both? And let me, if I may preface this, I used to think 10 years ago that it was about the individual. And because that's the default, let's go work with the individual. But then when they went back into the environment, boom, they'd hit a brick wall. And so I've concluded that it's really both. I don't know how you feel about this, but if that's the case, based upon your research and the things that you know, it's kind of like we're starting all over again.
Yeah. I hope this aligns with you, but this will be stark. That what I'm going to say.
No, it's what matters to you, Todd. I'm curious.
Well, it's straight out of systems theory. So any organism that's alive, like you or I, is a system, and we're not going to necessarily become something different. I cannot become you. I can't even change my personality. At my age, it's completely set. So this system is set in the way that it is. I can develop. I can become more adult in my capacities and higher brain functions, but I can't be different. The only way that can happen is through a trauma, like brain injury or something. And that's not true if I was very young and my system was building. I could kind of mentors or something can affect me. So it's the same with an organization. So an organization, if you think of it as a living system, it's kind of set in its ways, and it can develop. It can go from being a 5-year-old system organization to a 20-year-old organization, but it's the same going forward. It can't become like Microsoft cannot become Apple.
Mm-hmm.
Apple cannot become Amazon. It's set unless somebody comes in and, the other way is to come in and do a reorg that basically kills and resets the whole thing. And in a new direction, but you can't change things. An example that I have is, so 15 years ago, very senior Microsoft exec, he had retired. He had this great intention of helping this large therapy center here in Washington State, with all good intentions. And they brought him in because he had lots of connection for resources. So they wanted him to help with resources, and he wanted them to become like Microsoft. So he came in and he started trying to get everybody incentivized to work harder and get paid more. But these workers all did that job for almost minimum wage because they cared about people. And this whole idea of competing with each other to make more money, it actually started blowing up the company. And the company kind of took in this great guy, took him in, let him stay there for a while, and then basically crapped him out.
Well, this is why it's difficult. You bring up a good point here, because we oftentimes see this, right? A new leader comes in, they try to do things their way, they bring their people in. But I've seen that in departments. But if the environment still has a strong hold, they can fight all they want. It's not going anywhere. So again, if I may just try to make a point here, it could only just be a few people that can create a toxic environment.
Oh, absolutely.
And so I share this because oftentimes people think, well, it's the entire environment. No, not necessarily. It could be a handful of people that make everybody's lives horrible. Yeah. And but anyway, so let's shift gear here to how do we deal with teams, and what role does unconscious motivations play when dealing with conflict on a team? Can you give us an example of that?
one way of looking at that is so if you have a team with a group of any leader that I've worked with, if there's a group of people on your team and everybody's sort of aligned, and except for maybe a person or two, that person or two may be saying, yeah, I'm aligned consciously, but keeps doing behaviors or keeps doing interactions that are not aligned. And if you ask these leaders, like in the past, every time that there was somebody who was not aligned on your team and you kept them around for a while, what eventually happens? And they'll always say, well, they soured things eventually to the point that I let them go.
Exactly.
Yes. And a nuance that I'd add to this is there's these psychoanalytic personality types, and they're all equal. I mean, people have a hard time because when we use the real terms, it's there. Some of them are in the media fairly harshly, but each of them is equal. It matters how old you are in the personality, and so often those toxic people, it's not their personality; it's that they're still fairly psychologically young and not quite ready for the demands of the situation they're in. And they're unless they grow as a person, they're not going to be able to do it.
But let's turn this around. The leader,
Mm-hmm.
they know that that person's toxic, but yet they don't make the decision to move on from that leader. What is this telling me about this leader? And by the way, this is a real situation that's happening across every organization right now. Because that person, in fact, let me throw a layer to this, because I think that what you're going to say is going to help a lot of people. They know that that person doesn't fit anymore. They're just being so disrupted, but yet they have a long tenure with the company.
Mm-hmm.
What is this saying about the leader, and what advice would you give that leader?
What I would say that in general, it's going to end one way. And the longer that you wait, and the more pain that it occurs. And there's complexity. Sometimes somebody has organizational history information, but for the individual, it's interesting. So we want to do a blanket statement for everybody, but the one who's very detail oriented doesn't want to let go of people because they feel guilty. The person who really wants everyone to get along and is a great manager doesn't want to let go of people because they hate abandoning people, and it's their own issues. This somebody like me who can be very shy just doesn't want the confrontation, wants to avoid it if they can. Another person. So each personality, under pressure, goes down in age, and it's that emotion that keeps them from doing the thing that they should do on time.
Powerful. This ties back, and again, I'd love for you to comment on this, and then we'll start wrapping it up, Todd, though I can talk to you for a long time. I've come to learn the hard way, Todd, that knowing what's right isn't enough to start doing what's right, and knowing something's wrong isn't enough to stop doing it. Mm-hmm. What's the unconscious and conscious mind have to do with this?
You're asking questions that are literally 3-hour classes that we teach at Pathwise. So it's hard to do it in shorter terms.
No, it's okay. We're just flowing here, Todd.
I'll convey that. Thank you.
Hopefully excuse me, Todd. Hopefully someone will call you to want to learn more, but keep going.
Good. So we all, as little kids, again, do what they want to do. And then they start getting socialized by parents and by mentors and coaches and school. And all that's good. If you're going to live in civilization, you need to be socialized. And you could say little kids do what they want, and then they learn through socialization to do what they should. And if there's a healthy balance between shoulds and wants, then they're pretty healthy. And you could say the shoulds live in our ordinary conscious mind, and our wants, the good ones, live in the unconscious. They're sort of thematic, why we do what we do, why we love it. if somebody does a little bit more shoulds than they than wants in their life or in their career, they start getting anxious and a little neurotic. And that's probably where I live and almost everybody who lives in a real job with a lot of pressure. So that's okay. If I do even more shoulds than wants, then I start waking up in the middle of the night. And it's a little depression is kicking in. Um, if I do even more shoulds, if I'm up at like 70% of my life is doing what I should do and 30% is doing what I want to do, I'll find that anxiety and stress that I'm living with every day starts pushing on whatever somatic and psychological predispositions I have. So I might start like having high blood pressure, or I might start having more anxiety attacks. So it pushes on that. And so there's this continuum. And if I even do more shoulds than I want, then I can actually get really unhealthy. So there's this balancing that we need to do between our shoulds and our wants, that no corporation is going to help us with. We actually have to fight for that ourselves in the contexts of the work that we do. So I hope, did that get close enough?
No, that's fantastic. But so why wouldn't the organization, or maybe the question is, shouldn't the organization know, or even the leader, let's just start there, or the manager, shouldn't they know what your wants are? I mean, that's a lot of pressure. Shouldn't they assume some of that responsibility?
The ones who go through Pathwise Leadership, that becomes very important to them, because sort of riding that line between themselves and balancing their shoulds and wants and their teams tends to have the best productivity over time. But the people who neglect that might have these sort of short-term gains by putting, but in the long term, their team spins out or burns out or they take off. So it depends on what kind of game people are playing.
Well, let's hope that we try to avoid those games and just be real humans, to bring it back to the beginning of what drives your passion. Todd, thanks a lot for your time. I really enjoyed this. And
can I
go ahead. Go ahead.
One last thing I want to say.
Just so you know, I always give you the final word. So go ahead.
Well, it's just riffing on that last thing that you said. So if a leader is working with a team or an individual on a team, and they're making statements, I really love my job. So in a text, it sounds like they really love their job. If they say like, I really love my job, you can hear it, because you can hear how the tone, which is usually unconscious, relates to the text. But if they say, oh yeah, I really love what I'm doing, they're consciously thinking that they need to say they love it, but they don't. And that is, maybe the people who listen to you can listen to the tones of people and begin to hear their unconscious. This is what people in psychodynamic fields do, is how somebody says what they're saying gives you more valuable information than what they're saying. And that's how you look for what you just said.
That's a great way to wrap it up. Todd, you've been great. Thanks for your time, and we appreciate you being on the show.
Yeah, I'm very grateful. I would love to do it again. It's or even offline.
Absolutely. Would love to do that. And as we close every show, when you lead in the age of personalization, you will see things that others don't. Do what others won't, and keep pushing when prudence says quit. Have a great day.
Thanks for listening to Personalization Outbreak. Make sure to subscribe so you never miss a show. If you enjoyed the content, visit ageofpersonalization.com to check out our free streaming video series and learn how to get involved in the movement. I'm Glenn Llopis. I wish you a good day, and remember, without strategy, change is merely substitution, not evolution.